Well, I have to say I'm a big fan of them because I think they're well engineered. And I've been lucky to have met Dedo Weigert a couple of times now. I met him at the BSC show, but he came and visited Hogwarts one of the times we were shooting, so he's actually seen us using stuff, on the model. And I just think back to some of the lights that we had to use before that had, they were bulkier, they'd get very hot. And we also had a problem sometimes, say, with the stirrups slipping or sometimes lights exploding. And I think we bought our first set of Dedo lights as a unit probably late 80s, early 90s. I can't remember the exact date. And it was a set of four 100s, classic 100s. And it was just like, at last we've got a light we can focus, we can lock it in position, and you gradually get used to them. And those two, the 100 and the 150, really have been a workhorse now for us on model shoots, for over 20 years. And we played around with them when we were on Hogwarts. It's so many lights involved, and we're running back to the desk and we want control over everything. And we'd quite often animate lighting effects because there's no electricity in Hogwarts. So you want that sort of candlelight or lanterns where they're not all constant. So we came up with control boxes that we would run 6 Dedos at a time into a control box and then run that box back, DMX it back to computerized lighting desk. So we were starting to do things with Dedos which probably Dedo hadn't yet, which I know they now do, but we kept pushing it a little bit. And then we invested in a 436 as well, which is sort of like a classic Dedo on steroids. So that with a lens element, that again became really useful because the model's delicate. There's only certain places, and that's true of a lot of things we work on. Sometimes you can't physically get in the model, so once or twice having a lamp like that with a lens on, that you can just push in a blush or a shape onto a part of the building you couldn't access from the floor, it became a godsend, because you were just able to do things which otherwise would have been rigging from the ceiling of the stage or punching a hole somewhere in the model. So yeah, I mean, at our peak we must have carried dozens of them on some shoots. I'm thinking particularly, say, the marble staircase, which is inside the big tower on Hogwarts. That has doorways on all 4 sides. You have the staircases going up all 4 sides and crossing the tower, and then within that building the staircases move. So the first time we shot on that, the model was built on its side because it was the only way it would fit in the space available. And I mean, that just had, I think the first time actually animating the lights by hand. I think after that we did them all through the desk, and then I think in the end we would shoot separate elements, motion control, which could be animated. But yeah, with Dedo lights and along with practicals, it just meant with the spot and flood mechanism, the fact that they could be locked onto scaffold or you could use the plate to fix them on the set, that they just got us places we perhaps couldn't have got a few years before. And I think that's what probably surprised Dedo, is that's how many we used. Is that it just became natural to order those many sets on a model like that. I mean, I've done shoots where you're outside and they're inappropriate, but certainly for interior work and controlled environments, and particularly buildings, I love them. And that goes from traditional building, you've got a Gothic style architecture of Hogwarts, but then say on Entrapment, it was the Patronus Towers, and it's all high tech and brush metal, so that's another look again, but you needed to light this building so it sheened and with all its metallic cladding, so we've used it on a lot of different projects. I mean, size is always a critical thing for us because it's almost the holy grail that you sometimes, especially if you're shooting over speed, to slow action down, you run the laws of physics that, you know, each stop you want to gain on the camera, you're going to have to double your light output to get the equivalent. So there's always this thing of you want a small light, but you want it to be strong enough. But I think the secret is, and I'm not a physicist, but the secret is in the lens. I mean, I like the slide mechanism and that you can choose where you want to set it, but the secret is in the spherical lens, because that the light that's given off by the bulb is captured by the back element, and then it comes out efficiently at the front. And you think, oh yeah, but that's what a lamp does. But the interesting thing is that when we shot on Gormenghast, that problem I was referring to earlier about trying to mimic atmosphere, there's several ways you can do that. And the production designer on that was a guy called Christopher Hobbs, and one of his chosen methods of working is don't build a big model. We'll build a small model and we'll put it in water. So you haven't got all the expense of building a model the size of Hogwarts. You build smaller, it's a bit difficult for the model makers. You sit it in water, the water naturally mimics what air is doing. There's drawbacks, because if you use the wrong paint or the wrong dressing, you can contaminate the water. The water can also start to go off after half an hour's shooting. But what was interesting is if you use a Fresnel lens through the wall of the tank to light the model, there's something about the architecture of the V's that make up the rings on a Fresnel lens. I don't know quite what it is. When you fire that through glass and into water, it tends to disperse it. Yet when you use the Dedos, because these are spherical lenses, you'd get a beam, you'd get a crisp beam in the water. So all of a sudden I'd got Gormenghast Castle and the outside of the building, and I could pick with the Dedos, the 100 or the 150, you couldn't fingers of God or whatever, the individual beams, which goes back to what I'm saying with Canalettos, that I try to get layers into a model. So on the side of the tank, punching through the water, there was something about the way a Dedo lens behaved with water that you could pick out individual towers on a castle, which when I tried to do that with small Fresnel heads, they just couldn't do it. So that's one of those instances where playing around and having it, I don't think I could have done that with another lamp because of the nature of the design that Dedo came up with. Yeah, I mean, the first time, also, I think it was the fact they came in a smart black case was the thing as well, that all of us, they weren't these sort of manky old lights that had been delivered in a crate or something. They were in a smart case, and you open them and everything's slotted into the compartments. And it's the fact that you could sit it in your hand. And with the hundreds, I mean, I used them day in, day out for years on end, because we did a TV series with Jerry Anderson. And so we use them all the time. And I always know the hundreds you can hold in your hand. I can stand the 150s. I usually burn my hand by Friday because they get a bit hotter. But that was the other thing, is that even when they were on, you could still hold them and they didn't get too hot to touch. And it was the fact that you could almost say, oh no, we're going to go a third the way along on the spot and flood. It was the fact that you just felt you'd got that little bit more control. Because I've been on stop frame shoots, I've been on motion control shoots where these older lights, where the stirrup has slumped, or another model that have detonated, and if you're on a stop frame shoot and you're not doing, where you've got the ability to repair areas of a shot and you've got to go again, that is so frustrating. So I just think it was the fact that you'd suddenly got a reliable light that, to be honest, weren't prohibitively expensive, but that they would just go through the shoot, and once in a while you'd probably have to change a bulb, whatever, that they do, they do go, or they might start to discolour. And the only other thing I'd found was that model sets can be quite grubby and you can generate a lot of dust, and I think you do have to pay attention to keeping the lenses clean. So that's the only thing, because you do start to get a fall off on them, I think, if you don't look after them. Once in a while just give them a bit of TLC. Yeah, but we've used, with the lens attachments, we normally hire those in as well. We've used them with the stencils. We've used iris. We've animated the iris to get an effect. We've used the snoots on them. We've used the barn doors, or we've done the old trick with barn doors and then black wrap, and you just make little holes. I tend to use a car key or something, make a little hole in the black wrap if you want a really specific shape. So you just get used to using them. I think certainly whenever we're indoor with scale models, I just think it's really useful to have them, even if you're not using them in a model. It's the fact that you've got that small light source that you just might want, even if you're doing pickups or second unit stuff. It's that small light source that's nice for a little fill on the face or a little ping for the eye. Or I suppose I've grown up lighting using them, so it becomes like second nature having them there on the lighting list and there on the stage. That's, it's going back to the magician's analogy again. It's something you've got in the magician's box that, that might get you out of trouble. They've definitely found a gap in the market, I think.